vibe, so
Too
I
late.
don't anticipate having it. Okay, well,
No, you
I
can
don't have
ask.
to.
I'll edit this. It's okay. I can edit this out. I have the technology.
Okay, I don't expect anything happening, but like if my German Shepherd barges in or something like that, I don't anticipate that happening. But if something weird happens like that, would you like pause for a sec? Or
We can pause, or if it's not too
You can
noticeable, we can leave it as character, because people. One of the reasons we
yeah.
stopped editing is we hired a marketing research person to work with us. And
Oh,
they
cool.
actually said that that's why we don't pre-record the intro. They said it adds authenticity. We're not ready to go. I'm going to cut this part, so you're fine. But they said even when you stumble on it, that just makes it more normal conversation. So you're building the parasocial relationship. So they actually like it when that kind of stuff happens, believe it or not, because the overly produced stuff just doesn't feel as real to the reader or listeners, I guess. And for the record, all of our answers are geared towards listeners and readers, because we didn't court other authors. They don't buy our books. So, keep that in mind. Our audience are mostly like readers. We'll get about 250 plus reviews per episode and growing. So
yeah, no, I noticed your views and stuff and subscribers, because I've tapped on a couple episodes here and there. I'm like, yeah, they've got a subscriber base, definitely. So that's awesome.
And it's going to go up because I just partnered. Well, we just agreed to sponsor a company. Well, not sponsor. We're going to do an interview of a company that's got thousands, that's about to release a Magic the Gathering style card game in January. So we're going to record that in December. And so, we're giving him the platform to sound like a professional company. So he gets a win, and then he's going to try to get his nerdy audience to listen to us, so we get a win. So kind of cool. All right. I am going to mark this at, what is it?
1 minute, 50 seconds.
All right. And we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to allow our guest, the one, the only, Deanna Fedorak, to introduce herself to our listeners and viewers.
Hi, I'm Deanna Fedorak. I'm a science fiction and fantasy author. I released my debut novel, Children of Alpheus, through the Wild Rose Press in February of this year. I was in the Air Force for about 26 years prior to this, and I retired and decided to become a writer full time. I've been plinking along for several years writing. I have 2 kids, a husband, a German Shepherd, and when I'm not writing or reading, I like to travel anywhere with a beach that I'm there. Currently, I live in sunny Las Vegas, and I've been into boba tea lately, like we talked about before the show, since there's been a whole bunch of stores cropping up here in Vegas with that. So I've been trying them out because there are differences in quality. So, and that's me.
So you Las Vegas, you're speaking Stabby's language. That's where she was born and raised.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
So she knows all about
I'm
the
an Air
city.
Force brat.
Okay. So you've seen a lot of changes here.
Oh, yes.
The cool thing is about as Las Vegas has grown because of the city, all the imported water that comes in, and then people are watering the yard, just flushing the toilet. They've started changing the weather there because they're now introducing more humidity into the oxygen, and it's creating an effect that's greenifying the area. There's probably terraforming words for it that sound science fiction-y that I should know, but we're just going to smile and nod.
That's right.
They actually pay us to get rid of the grass.
Do they really? So what is it?
This is wild.
Do you just rake the dirt then?
Well, no, a lot of people do the desert landscape. Our house, we've been here over a decade, so we do actually have grass. Because I just had the one kid at the time, and I was like, I'd like some grass for him, please. And if you have pets, it's kind of nice. So we're kind of grandfathered in, but they'll give you a credit, and you save a ton on your water bill. If some of my neighbors have some pretty nice. They get creative. They put palm trees out there and nice river rocks and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I remember my time in the Army where we painted those rocks. So a yard full of rocks does not sound appealing. Nick, if you were probably not a problem child like I was as an E1, so you probably did not paint the rocks.
I had to. I had to mop up rain once, which is hard when you're in Fort Lewis, where it rains almost the entire year. Paint. I don't know if I painted any rocks. I raked sand once.
I've done that.
That was dumb.
The fun one was I paid it forward. So when I was a nasty, crusty sergeant and we had a problem child E1, I made him go out in the middle of a sandstorm in Iraq and with a sandbag to collect the sand because that's how he was going to fill it. You know, he
wow.
left his rifle in a porta potty again after that.
Ooh, yeah. That'll
Yeah,
do
It was
it.
that was Michael 15. I thought my answer was a little more creative. It didn't ruin his career.
I did have to replace a commander's rosebush once.
Yeah, we've heard that story. So because you mentioned the military and you're writing a little bit, do you feel like your time in the U.S. Air Force affected the way you told stories when you started writing?
Well, I will say it affected my editing because I like have a very analytical brain, because when you're writing, you kind of have to like do the finger painting kind of thing, to get the emotion to flow. I mean, it definitely had some kind of influence, but I notice most when I'm editing because now I'm going back and analyzing things, systematically. So that part of the career definitely impacted my writing.
So when you do write, do you feel like you ever draw from people you served with? Unofficially, of course, to protect the innocent or guilty, whatever.
I have a military sci-fi novella that's unpublished right now that I need to dust off because I have some really good editing comments, and there are amalgam of people I served with. How's that?
Yeah, I think those stereotypes and the tropes about the military people exist because those people exist, and we probably served with them, so it works. I was probably the kind of private that gave the officers the gray hairs, so I mean, I guess it's all turnabout's fair play that I got those trouble. Now, everyone always focuses on how being in the military might affect the way you tell the stories. Do you think it changes how you engage with stories as a consumer, as a reader, a watcher of the shows and such?
Have you ever outlined it like an op order?
No, actually, it took me, and so let me clarify. So I was like active duty for like 6 years, but then the remainder of the time I went into the reserves. So I was part-time for a lot of those years, so I still definitely had, a foot in the civilian world, the real world, if you will. But it took me 7 years to write my novel, so I did not outline it, and then got a couple manuscript consultations, and then after that, I was like, okay, I'm not going to take this long, to write a story anymore. I was a little bit, more purposeful, but I've read somewhere, and I tend to write things by hand because that's how your emotion flows from your writing hand, right? I mean, you
Really?
guys probably heard that, as writers. So
Yeah.
when stuff comes to me, like I jot it down and it just flows better. When I'm actually typing when I'm writing. So that I actually started writing to kind of get away from some of I loved my career and everything like that, but I actually wanted to do something a little bit more creative, and that's when I started writing.
So what did you do in the Air Force? Were you a pilot or did you have one of those other cool jobs that they
I
give
had
operating officers?
I was behind a green door, so I did stuff like weapons and tactics and targeting and mission planning. So I worked closely with a lot of the aviators in that aspect.
So did you get to see the aliens in the area we won't talk about because Nick's computer broke the last time we did?
Oh, all I'll say is if you come out here like during any of those parties to not rush the gate, I don't recommend it.
I actually
will be arrested, and like they are waiting for you, and they will laugh at you. And the sheriff will throw you in the clink and charge you bail to get you out. So just I would say just don't do it.
I like the
that's
clink.
bad.
That is an older word for the Who House, and I'm here for it. I actually, when they did the whole storming Area 51, I hosted an anthology on it because I was for sure it was going to be the Woodstock of our generation. But then the FBI came and cock blocked the hell out of that one, and there went our party. And then the sales didn't follow. but
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty funny.
I will tell you, like that. Okay, so as far as like the alien thing, so if you are in Las Vegas or the air driver ground, the alien jerky they sell at gas stations is actually pretty good. Like I don't need to
It's
be.
amazing.
It's like really good. So if you're looking for a a snack, like that's what I would pick up, and it's probably a lot healthier than the stuff that they have there.
Now I'm wanting to go full Wednesday Addams and be like, is it made with real aliens?
So it actually started in Baker, California. Alien Jerky started in Baker, California. At it's called Alien Jerky, the actual storefront, and it has a big UFO out front. And that's where Alien Jerky started, and it finally made its way into Vegas, which I thought was like the most appropriate place for it to sell.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually think we need to revisit our alien discussion now that all the Senate hearings have come out and get guests that are more enthusiastic. Ours, we're trying to be all serious and professional and dignified. Ain't nobody got time for that. So we just need to get everyone liquored up, and then we'll have a fun old chat where Nick's computer doesn't break. So, this would not be the Blasphemy Blades if we didn't do the religion question. So we've got to nail this out. We don't want to make Marissa mad. She stabs people. So, Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Okay. First off, I think we need all three. I am just starting to get into Firefly because of this podcast, actually.
Okay.
Because I was Googling some of the shows, and that show, I was like, wait a minute, I wanted to see that. I had recognized it. So I started watching it, and I haven't gotten too many episodes, but I do like it, the space Western. Star Wars is probably my first introduction to science fiction and fantasy, but if you're going to ask me what I have an emotional connection to, it would probably be Star Trek, because I'm just used to it was in my living room all the time when I was a kid. They would have different stories where Captain Kirk and his crew went, different planet, different kinds of people, and I just and I still have the nostalgia for that to this day. And I thought that they, did a good job with the movies, and Chris Pine standing in for like that earlier version of Kirk. The later version of Star Trek with Jean-Luc Picard was, to me, actually probably a more realistic leadership style, with the crew there and number one and everything. That's probably way a more modern space fleet would run things. But the character of Captain Kirk is a fun one.
Yeah, he was kind of like the Genghis Khan of the nerdy sci-fi world, because they say like something like 2/3 of the planet is related to Genghis Khan in some way, and I imagine 2/3 of the galaxy is going to be related to Kirk after a while, just because that man had a love affair with the aliens. So
he had a lust for the
a lust for life, you might say.
A lust for life and aliens. So he was probably starting franchises in each galaxy he was in.
They have the Star Trek convention here in Vegas, right?
No, I did not.
Yeah. Yes, they do. And I think they're going to have another one November. I got to take a look at it, because like if William Shatner actually showed up, I mean, he's like in his 90s now. Like I would totally go down there.
Have you seen the new show he's doing? Have you seen the new show? So William Shatner's doing a new show where it's got a bunch of, it's like a vote him off the island kind of show, only it's vote him out of the habitat, and they're doing they're supposed to be living in a mock Mars colony. And going through actual missions like astronauts would out in the desert somewhere. I don't remember where they're filming it, but I know it was, in the Sahara, I'm pretty sure.
On Mars?
Yeah, supposedly it's like a mock-up for people that would be going to Mars, like what to expect. Because, Elon Musk's all in the news. My favorite, some of the favorite cosplay I've seen is this lady who's all green and very pregnant, and it's like Kirk was here, is the sign she's holding.
That's pretty good.
And
that's funny.
I have to check out that show now that you describe it.
I will.
Pretty interesting.
I will have to look it up, because I saw the trailer for it. It should be starting soon, and maybe we'll do an episode where we actually do a series review of that one, because that sounds like Nick would enjoy it too. The other favorite one is they did have you seen the commercials where you might be entitled to compensation? The lawyers for insert whatever. There's some of those set up like, if you're related to Captain Kirk, you might be entitled to back child support. And some of the fans put this together. I saw it on YouTube. It was hilarious. Unfortunately, they got copyright struck, so it's not around anymore. But it was gold. So, all right. Because we are polytheistic, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, or The Wheel of Time?
This one's pretty difficult. I will say I have not read the Wheel of Time books. I try to watch some of the Amazon series, and I don't want to judge the books by that because I had a hard time getting into the series. It might be a fine show and everything like that. I I really don't want to choose between Games of Thrones and Tolkien. I mean, I think we need both for different reasons. I was just down at the Las Vegas bookstore, which is an indie bookstore here, and and now I'm thinking about it, and they just got the first edition. Like they get like some rare books of the Lord of the Rings, and they have the whole trilogy down there. And so I'm looking at it on their Instagram page, going, "Okay, should I call and ask how much this is? This is a first edition hardcover." And then they had like another edition down there, the one where the author, it was him, not his son, actually like drew the map. One of those editions. So we need Tolkien, and I need Game of Thrones for HBO. I just do. So.
I know one of the ladies we've had on the show, Kristen Catherine Rush, actually opened an indie bookstore, I think, in Vegas somewhere too, because she moved down there for the weather. So there's a lot of good stuff going on in the indie book scene. I suspect it's probably tax related because Nevada's a very tax friendly state.
We are.
That's what I'm told.
We don't charge income tax. No income tax, just sales tax.
So that's one of the places it might be worth visiting. So next time we send Marissa there, we will have to have Stabby buy us some alien jerky and make it a trip. Then it's tax write-off, Nick. Get to that. That's tax write-off.
Why do I need to go to Vegas? Deanna's right there.
Yes, but she's got family there, so she can write off the trip for taxes and visit her family.
Oh, all right, fine.
The in-laws.
All right. And this is the Marissa wants it. Stabby wants us to prove that we're not troglodytes. So we've got one more religion question for you. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
Coffee or tea, and how do you take it? We will judge you. There is a right answer.
I drink both.
Okay.
But if you want me,
I get it.
I like caffeine. It just depends. I start the day usually with coffee, but for some reason when it gets cold out, I like tea. I don't know if that's counterintuitive, but like I'll take Earl Grey a lot of times in the morning.
It's like your taste buds change with the colder weather.
Yeah. So I have right now I have like a Ninja coffee maker because I like my coffee really hot. And it's right now I have a Black Rifle coffee subscription, and I use just a little bit of a natural creamer because I don't like a bunch of junk in there. I'd like to taste my coffee. I did use Nespresso pods for a while. I still use them, every now and then, but I've been sticking to this subscription lately.
So we actually are talking with a company about a sponsorship that is a coffee company. So we've decided before we say yes, we have to sample it. So we both, Stabby ordered for her household and I ordered some for mine, and we're going to try and make sure it's actually good. Because the last thing you want to do is pimp something that tastes like garbage, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
But we're so addicted to coffee that we had a sponsor reach out. We spent one accidentally on purpose, maybe. We spent the first half hour just talking about coffee with one guest. It was glorious. We blame Marissa.
Hey man, we gotta get on task here.
Stabby was like, no, back to the coffee. So when it gets cold, do you like things like hot chocolate or what is it, steamed apple cider?
I mean, like if I want dessert or something, I'll get a hot chocolate, but
dessert. Okay.
Because it's something like that, but it's usually coffee, and then it's usually most of the time coffee, but sometimes I'll get on a tea kick. Like I said,
I like the way hot apple cider smells, but I've never liked the way it tastes.
You tried Glühwein if you're talking about hot dessert drinks?
No, I have not. I've never even heard of that.
That's a spiced wine. I was introduced to that at like my first assignment in Germany. So when it's really cold, it's pretty tasty.
Nice.
I learned to be careful when people recommended alcoholic beverages to me. The first time they let me try sake, I ended up in a gutter, left alone in downtown Charleston. It was bad. I do not recommend it. And it's smooth, so it goes down, and before you know it, you're like, what universe am I in? I know it makes it dangerous.
When you try to stand up is when you feel it. You're like, Oh, I messed up.
Let's just say I barely managed to
much.
sober up before the wedding, but So note to self, if you're getting married, don't do your bachelor party the night before you're getting married. Do it like a week so you can recover, get electrolytes in you. I happen to have
it was your wedding?
Yeah, it was my wedding. I happen to have a best friend that was a combat medic. So he hooked me up with the idea of life. And so I was able to function, but I do not recommend it to anyone over the age of like 22 because your body stops recovering so quickly. All right. So with that being said, what got you into writing? Because you went from Air Force and whatever your civilian top secret job of hiding the aliens in the Alien WITSEC program. Oh, we're not supposed to talk about that. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
We'll edit that out. But when you're not hiding the Martians, you obviously
Yeah. So to answer this, that was like the first job I saw myself doing as a kid, writing. Okay. And then I discovered like being a creative is like really hard to sustain, or I learned that pretty early. Then I thought, well, maybe I should get into publishing. And then I was like, well, then I have to live in New York. This is, before like the internet and everything like that. And then, I got in the Air Force. So what got me started writing again was two things. One, when my kids were like really little, you watch them, discover things and create things. And I was like, I kind of miss that part of myself. And number two, there was a local author that had a series of lectures at a library like 5 minutes from my house, and he was a fantasy author. And I was like, I'm not doing anything. I don't have any excuse. I'm just going to go and listen. He's very engaging, and he would just give a series of lectures on how to write. And I sat there for about a year before I wrote anything. He would come once a month, and he'd like talk about a different topic of writing. And I would just sit there and take notes. And like finally at the end of the year, I wrote a short story. I was like, yay. And then I was like, okay, I need to write more. So that's how I started.
Okay. So what is it that made you pick, sci-fi and fantasy? Because there's lots of things you could write, from romance to mysteries to thrillers to whatever else the cool kids are reading. What made you kind of narrow down to sci-fi and fantasy to speculative fiction?
Yeah. I read a wide variety of genres, but I just like all the different possibilities that science fiction and fantasy could offer. It's like, I don't want to be in the real world. Put me in another world somewhere else, with different characters, with different abilities. And let's go from there and let's have some fun.
Good answer.
Okay.
I like that. Escapism. Let's bring it back.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. It's one of the things, and there are authors whose politics and worldviews I agree with, and I still think get too preachy. And I realized if I wanted to get preached at, I'd be at church. I kind of read to have fun and escape. So I like it that there seems to be almost a resurgence of other authors that are like, yeah, the real world sucks enough. We don't need to drag it into our fiction. So it's kind of nice.
I told an author friend of mine who does mill sci-fi also. I was like, dude, I agree with your politics, and even that bored me to tears. Please remove it.
Yeah. Well,
or water it down a bit.
Or use some subtext, right? Like show what it happened. Like I could really appreciate, a story if there's themes in it that maybe I wouldn't have thought of, or even if I don't agree with them, but if they're really masterful in how they craft it and it's like really entertaining and it draws me in, I'm like, that's a good story,
Yeah, subtlety, subtext. I prefer that.
Yeah.
So I will say themes in the subtext is something that nobody's ever convinced on an argument on the internet where you're yelling back and forth in all caps. But there are times where I've read a well-crafted story and I've thought, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. And I have, dove deeper and changed my opinion. So I do think it is a valid way to do it. So are there any themes that, because you're as a military veteran and someone who writes kind of military themed stuff, are there any themes that sort of resonate with you the most that you try to bring into your fiction?
Well, I could talk about it in relation to the one story. I like right now, the last couple stories I read in had to do with like technology and just like how it affects intimate relationships, with people. So in Children of Alpheus, it's got a dystopian flavor. It's a science fiction. And so genetic engineering is in it, and there's been a lot of authors that looked at genetic engineering. But I did want to look at it a little bit differently, kind of a market-based society where there's like a governing corporation. It does take place on another planet. And I do it from a motherhood perspective because a lot of it's more in fantasy. You'll see, them have like the strong mother characters, queens and whatnot have you. I don't see it as much in the science fiction, but one filmmaker who actually does put it in there a lot is James Cameron. Like he did that with Terminator uh, and Sarah Connor. He did it with Ellen Ripley in Aliens. So before I get off track, because your original question was about some of the themes, so I look at like technology and like how that affects intimate relationships. That's like where I am right now.
So, and this is going to sound kind of cliche at this point because the movie's older. Did you watch Demolition Man, where their take on what modern interpersonal connections between the genders might look like for future pairings? I'm trying to keep this family friendly.
Yeah.
But, with the headset and the virtual reality.
Yeah, because with Sylvester Stallone and Sandra Bullock, I actually need to like probably turn that on. Like my kids will they'll like some of those old 80s and 90s movies and watch it with us, because that was like they present it as like this idealistic society, right? But then Sylvester Stallone is in there um and he finds out it's really actually quite totalitarian, right? The way that they use control over people. But yes, I understand what you're talking about with the visors and all that kind of stuff. So, and I think that's like one of the appeals for like science fiction for people who read it, for authors. You're like, because you're constantly asking yourself, like, okay, what makes us human? How does this change us? Right? What are we evolutionary geared towards? And what would a society that's organized differently look like?
That's actually a topic Nick gets really deep in when we get him a few drinks in, about the concept of transhumanisms and where your humanity starts and stops and where something else begins, because that's something the comic book industry dives into a lot with their superpowers.
Oh, that's our bread and butter.
Is that something you've considered?
Yeah. Are you asking me or Nick?
No, Nick and I
he's
talked
asked
about
me
it
that a million times.
Okay.
No, he's asking you.
Yeah, I was just listening, like, because Elon Musk, he keeps talking about like Neuralink, and there's like good things about it. So when I do, and I've read stories where there's that technology, because there's like the post-humanism and then there's the transhumanism, right? They're like slightly different flavors, but it involves that actually, without saying any spoilers, like I do explore that in my book.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds interesting. I will say that, it didn't really sound originally like something that I'd be interested in. And then the more in the pre-show you talked about, I'm like, I think I'm going to have to read that. And my TBR pile is already like a million stacks deep. Yeah. Like if we lost the internet today, after just with the books I've already got, like I've got a lifetime of stuff I still need to read. I'm good.
Okay.
But I'm adding yours to the pile.
It's like there's more books than like there's less time and lots of good books, right? So yeah, definitely.
And I realized that buying books and reading books are almost two separate hobbies.
Yeah, it's just like comics. I got a stack of comics from my pull bins from local comic book shops that I need to get to. My real life keeps getting in the way, and I'm like, I'll get to you Friday morning between 8 and 9. I got to schedule them like appointments.
I see. Do you have Wonder Woman behind you? Is that Wonder Woman on your wall?
Yes.
Like the dolls? Okay. Now I
got like 3 figures of her.
Okay. Yeah, no, I have a lot of those comics of her, so yeah.
Oh, they're great. Depending on the run.
Yeah, it does.
Did you like the Gal Gadot version of Wonder Woman, the movie?
I did. You know what? I thought when they first cast her, I was like, I had like a different picture of an Amazon in mind.
Was it China from the WWE? Because that was my,
I was like she needs
muscular.
Yeah, like I had a different picture, and I'm like, but I thought she did really good job and with it, and I enjoyed it, especially the first one. The second one they try to get like into the 80s, which I do appreciate, all the music and stuff like that, but it felt like a little bit different flavor than the first
It
one.
was a complete 180 is from the
Yep.
tone of the first one,
Yeah.
and I'm
So
sure that was intentional.
yeah, but at least like the first one, then they had her on Amazon Island, and you could see like how like the origin piece of that, which I think is part of the allure of that story. Big little of
Yeah,
all superhero stories, but particularly for that
especially
one.
ones that are like they're gods. She's a daughter of Zeus, so um, I like when they go back to Thermoskia and show her childhood and her learning to be this Amazon, warrior. It's really cool. I enjoy those
Yeah.
parts of those shows.
Plus, and Chris Pine, is like sitting there as the only guy looking around, while surrounded by all these Amazonian women who could probably hurt me if they wanted to, but he rolls with it.
But he still does a little Kurt, Captain Kirk with him. He's like, if I got killed by these women, it'd be worth it.
Right.
All right,
He's a
so
typical soldier.
he fits in. But all of my favorite superheroes were always soldiers first. That's why I'm all about Captain America. Go Army.
I'm surprised you're not a huge Nick Fury fan.
And I'm just not as deep into it. I got into comics because my youngest, it's kind of his obsession. So like I've watched all the shows and read the novelizations because he doesn't like picture books, but he doesn't mind reading the chapter books versions of them. I don't know. Everybody's different. I'm really not hating on it. I've read a few graphic novels that were pretty amazing, but so I've learned about it by proxy mostly. So
Nothing wrong with that.
we've all got to have our passions. And
My favorite.
what was that, Stabby?
I was saying that the DC Bombshells are actually some of my favorite comic books to read and some of my favorite figures to own. They have Wonder Woman looking like Rosie the Riveter.
Oh, nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
It kind of does a thing.
So Nick, we're going to put this in the. We're going to have to make a note to come back to you so we don't bogart Deanna's time. But we should definitely do a episode where we talk about indie versions of the kind of favorite comic book characters we like, so we can support independent authors. Because like if you like Captain America, you might like insert comic guy here. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. And have some of your indie author comic book guys come on.
Oh, geez. I got so many friends of those. They're going to be, hold on. How do I phrase this? No, that's going to sound weird. Nope, that's not kid friendly. I have a lot of friends that'll do that.
Okay, sounds like a plan. We are going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man, and then we're going to jump in and talk about Deanna's novel.
Grab your swords and get ready to level up. When gaming journalist Ray experiences a tragic accident with the next generation of gaming consoles, he finds himself stuck in the mystical land of Valka. Trapped in a world filled with magic beasts, warring factions, filthy bandits, and a level system that's out of this world. The only problem is, his only way out may be through. Ray must fight like his life depends on it, because it just may. Survival means victory, and defeat could mean the end. Forever. Legends Online Genesis releases on Audible January 7th. Digital and hard copies now available on Amazon.
Wow, we really should get him to update that because that was last year when he recorded that, so it's been out for a year. Still a good novel. I recommend it.
So gives it 4 stars. Check it out.
I haven't dove into lit RPG because some of it's so crunchy that it's just too much math for my fiction. I don't mind rolling dice on occasion, but reading about it, in the lit RPG style seems a little. I don't know. It doesn't mush in my head very well. So
it took me a while to get used to it.
I understand there's a difference between game lit and game lit and game fiction. There's 2 different kinds where one's less mathy, and I just lit RPG, game lit, and there's a few other terms they use. I definitely something I want to get into more because I like games. I mean, they're fun. But speaking of fun, so Deanna, how did you come up with the concept that became your novel?
So I knew I wanted to write something a little dystopian, and I was looking at genetic engineering. We had some family members. We were managing, some medical conditions and stuff like that. And I wanted to explore it as a theme, like I said. So that's essentially how I got started writing it. I had an idea of where I wanted to go with it, but I wanted to, like I said, that analytical, part of my brain wanted to look at it like what a whole society like that would look like constructive. I did set it on another planet because I could play with some things with the climate and the weather. It's a circumbinary star system, right? So there's two suns that orbit around each other. I did have to make it stable because humans are inhabiting this planet, right? They're from Earth, and so the planet goes around those two stars, the center of mass, right there. And so I put a colony on there, and it's the last remnant of human society. So Earth is pretty much gone. I don't give too much backstory in my book about what happened, but there were some Oort cloud disturbances. If people want to, run with that and look it up of climate. So it's about a mother who has a baby with a DNA anomaly in this genetically engineered colony. And because he is born really different than everybody else, she decides that the governing corporation wants to exploit him, and she picks up on that. So she's going to go on the run, and she's going to live among the fringes of society who happen to be naturally born. So there's difference there in the society, and then, like I said, with the two suns, I do some things with the climates. There's some gamma storms there that occur frequently, so there are reasons why the population is genetically engineered. It's safer. The women don't carry the babies; they're gestated by the corporation. So she is trying to figure out exactly what they want with him.
Are you a
That's a very
fan of?
interesting take. You see a lot of that in dystopian, well, just media in general, books, movies, things like that, where corporations like replace the government. Um,
Mhm.
I don't. It may be a personal question, but do you think that's kind of where society is going, not just in the United States, but kind of globally? Like we just have these conglomerates that are making the decisions. Do you see truth to that?
Um, when I started this like 7 years ago, I'm like, this was just a fiction novel, or
Yeah,
it
it's
was
funny when
supposed to
fiction
be.
becomes reality.
Um, like I do think that. Yeah, so someone put, yeah, this is like, so if you want to think of like the movie Gattaca, but on another planet with a mom, like, yeah, that is my book. That's my pitch for my book. If you like Gattaca, like on another planet with mom, then that's a
I like
story.
that though. That
Yeah,
was a really good movie. I thought all
yeah.
those actors gave great performances for that type of environment. Um, at least it wasn't
Corporations,
like RoboCop, you know,
right.
OCP running stuff.
Yeah, I think like corporations have always had lots of influence. It's just that I feel like technology has amplified everything, and maybe we're just
Yeah,
like just much more aware of it. It's like just much more in our face. And they, I mean, there is innovation happening. I don't, want to knock the private sector in that way, but it also comes with some other things that you have to think about.
yeah, like dealing with the FDA or CDC or stuff like that, or
Yeah.
all
So,
kinds of things.
mhm.
No, that's real interesting, and that there's a man. I don't know, man. I don't want to ask this question because it might be a spoiler. The child that's born with the genetic anomaly.
Mhm.
Was there any type of medicinal help or push in that, or do you think it was just, or did it like appear naturally? I know you're talking about genetic engineering and things like that, genetic manipulation.
Well, he's supposed to be genetically engineered because everybody, including her, and so I probably should set this up. So she's phase one, meaning she's completely healthy. Okay. So, because she's
Okay.
had everything, all the diseases edited out of her germline. Um, and because of the radiation from the gamma storms, and that idea came from, we actually have gamma terrestrial flashes here on Earth. Like, I don't know if you do that, but they like they're usually at the top of thunderstorms.
Hmm.
But I was reading a NASA article about that. I'm like, hey, I'm going to put this on my planet. That sounds kind of cool. I'm just going to, bring it down to the ground level and raise the stakes a little bit for the humans living there. So that is why the corporation does that, and the women want them to, right? Because everybody uh, wants their offspring to be born healthy and safe.
Right.
And So her partner is phase 2, which is a little bit more advanced genetic engineering, where they're starting to pick traits and dispositions of people. There are some things that they tie directly to genetics, but others they'll just give you disposition. But the society is kind of built around fostering that, the parents, selecting that and trying to channel, their kid for a certain path. So when they have the baby and he's born different, part of the mystery for her to solve is why this happened. Um,
Right.
I'll if I say it, I'll probably give it away. But
Oh, you don't do
yeah,
that. We want them to read it. We're here
yeah.
to make sure that you get as many sales on this book as possible.
So, but she's trying to figure out, number one, how this happened. And it's actually the people who are like naturally born that have the answers, right?
Hmm.
They understand what's happening. And number two, like how do I keep him safe from them, and what do I need to do to keep him off my back?
Now, this society is it's so far into the genetic engineering part for every person, I guess, born. Um, are there any, I guess, like purebloods, naturally born, non-tampered with DNA type people in here, or is that society advanced past that?
So that's who is on the fringes of society that she's talking to.
Okay.
So okay, so the colony was set up as the last known sanctuary for the ark ships for humanity to settle in. Um, and they set up the genetic engineering program, and it's an imperative for the human race to survive. But there's always a couple people they're like, nah, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna live, by my rules, not yours.
Right.
They're in violation of the regulations. The society looks the other way because they're used for manual labor for a lot of things.
Okay.
They actually are miners because there's a mineral spar on this planet that is used to protect the uh, the inhabitants. Okay, that they have to build the buildings out of this stone because that's what protects the indigenous life there. Okay, so the planet has the
From the
resources for that.
from the
Um,
radiation of the suns.
right.
Is that was
So
okay. That's really cool. A little bit of Paradise Lost in there too. If you
yeah.
guys have ever read that book, I love I love those types of those stories. I think they really make you think about how society is and how your involvement in society is and the advancement of technology and could it be and it just
So
almost
I
overloads the
will.
brain,
I will
but it's
give
great.
you. So I will say I'll give a preview because this is like in the first chapter. So it opens with like her sitting there, at the doctor's office with the pediatrician as they're examining the baby, and the test comes up, flag for something, and she's trying to figure it out. But so the gestation, um, the embryos are in genetically modified pigs, because we get a lot of transplants now, organ transplants from pigs medically, but they've modified them to have, instead of where you have a plastic sac, at least with pigs you have like a biofeedback loops, you have a placenta, things like that, that it would allow. And you could pack a whole bunch of embryos in them at once to maximize your profit if you were a corporation.
So when you came up with this idea, were you familiar with the experiments that we did with the artificial wombs with like the lambs and the other animals?
Yeah, I did look at that, and some people were like what, why don't you go that way? And I'm like, there's a purpose why things are different in my book. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah,
But yeah, I was familiar.
I've heard some authors even use it in the for the idea of like abortion wouldn't be, and this is a hot button issue, so we're not diving into it, but
Okay,
the
good.
idea is you could solve the abortion issue with artificial wombs because you could get rid of the baby as the mother wanted, but not have to kill it as the pro-life, and it'd be like a perfect solution. Of course, I don't think anything's going to solve that issue because you're still going to have fundamental disagreements, but I do like the idea people are going down where let's advance our way through through the trouble so we can find solutions everyone can agree on. The only problem I see with that is people just like to be disagreeable. So I think we'll find other things to fight about if it's not that one. But I said that to ask, when you design the society where babies are gestated in artificial wombs, were you thinking along the lines of like what that would do to a culture?
Yes. Yes. So I mean, I think I mean, I think genetic engineering is like, already here. They're already doing experiments. There's some, off the grid doctors that you could find if you want a male fetus or a female fetus for whatever reason. So I do think it's, I think it's, will be here and we will have to deal with it and we have to figure out what it is as society. I mean, the positive aspects of that is like you can do away with a lot of pain and suffering, for somebody, but that's one hand. But on the other hand, there might be other implications that affect society writ large.
Yeah.
So in China, I know they did the experiment, and we'll probably never
Yep.
hear about the results where they did the doctor did the off books experiment. He was trying to make babies AIDS resistant because I guess that's a problem in some of the poorer communities, and so he sort of, without permission from the parents or the government, he used CRISPR to give them a resistance to that. I do wonder, and I wonder if you factor this in, like as you try to balance the scales one way to negate one thing, do you factor in when you're building this world what the knock-on effect might be? Like, okay, yeah, we're resistant to this now, but oh, by the way, we've got a weakness to this other thing because of it.
That starts becoming a little bit. I'll just say I'm writing the sequel, and I put a little bit of that in there. So.
Okay. So you mentioned the sequel. So clearly then there's 2 books at least. Where do you see this story going?
I see it being a trilogy, and then I'll probably stop after that. So
not stop writing, I hope.
Not stop writing, but just move on to a different story in a different world. But I did, like get a map drawn and everything like that, professionally, produced to where so people could see the continent, and because they live in a river valley, and because of the 2 suns, and because I did some research with it, I was like, well, I don't want to make the planet tidally locked, right? It'd be like super hot and daylight all on one side all the time, and the other side would be in complete darkness. But with the difference and the drastic variations in the temperature of the day because of the 2 suns, I just lost my train of thought. It'll come to me here in a second.
Yeah, the 2 suns is definitely something that you're starting to see more of. I mean, we found proof that we know they exist, but previously we hadn't thought that there would be anything habitable on them.
Yeah, so no, there is. So what I have is I have a habitable zone, if you will. And when you look at habitability of planets, besides, having water, the Kepler telescope, NASA telescope, there's a lot of Kepler star systems, which are, they think, circumbinary planets, and based on their distance and all that, that there's water on them, and that there's a certain temperature range within them that they think humans can survive. So that's what I meant to say. So I have the map and I have the zone that's habitable. So they're in a river valley where there's like a sweet spot, because there are oceans on the planet, and there's a supercontinent, essentially. There is a southern pole, but I don't really reference it because it's frozen down there, so it's not really geared for human habitation. And so they're wearing like, so my main character, Alina, she's also young. She's 21 because there's an emphasis on fertility on this planet, and there is a deterioration. I mean, it's not as simple as like, hey, just freeze your eggs and have kids this far down the road. There is a deterioration process with freezing, so you do kind of want to hit women at their peak fertility if that's the emphasis. And she wears a climate suit when she's outside. It just helps adjust. Like, it might start out really cold in the morning and be like super hot by the afternoon, and it depends on the sun's position. So in the book, they go around each other every 8 days. So people in the city, Alfeo City, they'll see 2 sunrises and 2 sunsets a day, except for the one day there'll be an eclipse, right? But that day is the weather's going to be a lot different. And they're going to have different formations of the sun in the sky. Like, in the middle of that orbital period, they'll call it wedge formation when the 2 suns are offset 45 degrees. That's what they're going to look like.
So what her research, Nick, and what the new telescope is telling us is that as much as we made fun of back in the day the solar systems that George Lucas designed, he wasn't totally wrong about all of his concepts of what some of these alien planets might exist.
No, he wasn't.
Our guest here went way down the rabbit hole for her research, and I commend you on that.
She doesn't want you to know this, but she actually talked to the aliens that really live there, and she's kind of borrowed their maps. True story.
Okay, they probably mentioned me, and hopefully they said pleasant things.
You don't have to tell us about what they did to you. It's okay. You could.
I mean, you can sit again. So
they didn't even laugh when I said the joke's on you. I'm into that stuff. They were like harvesting earwax or something like that. It felt so good.
So Nick, normally, you go off on the cover. So what are you thinking? I'm digging the subtlety of this cover. What are you thinking?
I like it. Before I begin, though, I got to retract myself. I said Paradise Lost. I meant Brave New World.
Yeah, Aldous Huxley, yeah.
I definitely didn't want Stabby to get some hate mail. Oh, Nick's an idiot. Did you know the difference? They're 2 entirely different stories. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. But my brain is a superhighway in a warehouse where none of the filing cabinets are next to each other, nor are they organized, and it's run by monkeys that are hopped up on coffee. So
that sounds like Warehouse 13. Good show.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. No, I think the going back to the art. Now that I've kind of tried to save face, I probably failed, but I do. It's simple and it's very limited colors, but it's impactful. Sometimes, a lot of times, less is more. So you get a really good look at what the city, the technology, the architecture is like there in the background. I do like it shows that it's a binary star system. There's ships. I dig that. I like things that fly. And you use less than 10 colors, which I think is good. Other than that, sometimes it overloads the eyes while looking at it. And I think everything's placed well. The typography is done well. The font. Did you have that font custom created or?
So we had a list of. So I didn't have much say in my cover. What we had to fill out a sheet, but we had a list of cover designers that we could choose from.
Mm-hmm.
And so she actually didn't do too many sci-fi. She had like 1 or 2, but she did a lot of fantasy. So this was done by Jennifer Grief. And so I gave her an idea of what the world looked like, and I gave the blurb of what the story was about. And I thought it would be cool if there were 2 suns. They do. You are allowed to put in 1 or 2 things that you really want on the cover, but what they emphasize is, hey, it's got to be a thumbnail size. So we're not going to put a ton of stuff on the cover. Like, so if people are like clicking on, things on Amazon, and they're on their phone, it's got to pop out right away without all this other stuff on it. So that's what she came up with. She put the little space, shuttle in herself, which I thought was a really nice touch because, that kind of helps like nail down the genre. And I was really pleased with it, which is a good thing because like, it was like, because I am with another publisher. If you don't, I've talked to other authors who are, if they didn't like their cover, they're like, well, you know what, we like it, and that's what we're going with.
Right. It's kind of.
I will say it is. I will say it is color. Nick, hold on. I will say this is colorblind approved. I can actually see the double suns, so. You get bonus points for that. Most of the time, I'm just clueless on the covers. I just smile and nod.
Well, the cover looks like it's the sunrise because you talked about 2 sunrises, 2 sunsets. Was that something that was on that list that you put down to emphasize that it was like a sun rising over Alpheos? Or
no, I just said, hey, could you put a futuristic city? By the way, there's 2 suns. It's on another planet. And that's what she came up with.
Okay. No, I think it's very impactful, and our colorblind friends can enjoy it also. The color palette is pretty awesome, so whoever you hired, they give them a shout out. They did a good job.
Yeah. So, and so the
We
fun
will.
part also of that, sorry, I mean, we could talk about it a little bit more, is I do come up with some, that's the fun part of sci-fi, to have fast and cool aircraft.
Yes.
So I was really pleased that she did that, because I do come up with like a couple different aircraft in there. Courtesy of, I do have a scientific aviation advisor at home that I'm able to talk about with that. So
Nice.
yeah.
That's cool.
But there's like a hover jet, in there, and then there's some other bigger aircraft.
More helicopter or VTOL?
The hover jet is has VTOL capability.
Okay.
I don't know.
I normally VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing. So it's a jet, but the wings fold to point the jet down to lift and then back to push.
Like an Osprey or a Harrier?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yes.
Then I do know what a VTOL is, and now I feel dumb.
So blades that spin to lift, or jets that blow whatever, fusion, whatever. This is the extent of my knowledge on tech, okay, people?
It's
There's
suck,
a reason
squeeze,
I
bang,
focus-
blow for a turbofan engine.
Yes, see that.
That's how it goes. Yep.
Metal tube
That's how-
chicken fly with wings.
see, this is one thing you
Sorry,
learn
I'm
in
in
the
the
industry.
Air Force, so I did learn some of this stuff.
I hope so, because I'm a grunt. I was in the Army. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, metal tube that flies, get inside, hope not die.
Mhm.
Very caveman-esque of us.
I
So
called
we'll
it
break it
air
down Barney
support
style.
once. I
As long
called
as
it
you
air
have a good
support
pilot
once, so.
or a good crew, you'll be fine.
We had a couple
I
of
still don't
helicopter
understand
pilots
I
that
still
would
don't
come in
understand
like,
Go, Nick. I'm muting.
regular
Lag
man.
rate.
No, just helicopter pilots that saw us baking in the hot Iraq sun while we're on a foot patrol, and they would fly down just enough to just kind of take some of the heat away. And I thought that was the coolest thing.
That was
I'm like, oh, they do care once we're out of the aircraft.
You had a different experience with the Army aviation than I did. I just remember the one time we called air support, and they hovered above us in the middle of a firefight, like, oh, we can't figure out if you're the enemy or the good guy. So we're just going to leave you. Bye.
Okay, bye.
So
I do have a funny story about Air Force aviation involving
Okay.
a C-5.
Oh, okay.
So we all get on here, and the intent is to jump out of this ridiculously large aircraft.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, I don't think that sounds safe. So the crew chief, or whatever the guy was, he had a headset. He looked important. He was checking doors and stuff. Probably a crew chief. Comes to me and he's like, we can't slow down long enough for a safe exit. I'm like, does that mean the jump's canceled? He's like, no. I'm like, so what are you going to do? He's like, we'll slow down just enough, but just above where we won't fall out of the sky. And it's really going to hurt you. I'm like, I don't think I want to jump anymore. He's like, that's up to you and God. And then he went away.
So did it blow you like all over the place then?
Oh,
that
I
jump?
got sucked out of there like an alien out of an airlock. Like I had like one toe out the door, and they had like the wind blocks like door thing. It's kind of vented, but it's like steel. And I got one toe out, and I was like, gone. And it was probably the hardest chute opening I ever had. I broke 3 risers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I sang like a choir boy for about 48 hours after that, because all the straps in the groin area tightened up. Everything tightened up.
Yeah.
It's like someone just, very strong men on each strap was just like, oh, here you go. Now you're secure. And that was just for me getting sucked out of the aircraft. So 2 risers, 3 retention, of course, I don't know. But I looked, and yeah, there's the snap little lines there. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm surprised this thing didn't just come right off the chute.
So
yeah, I was, but just the conversation beforehand had me really scared.
well, we're glad you're still here, because I needed you later. So one of the things I will say is the Air Force. We did some resupply runs to the Air Force out of Altacundum, and they had the old Iraqi air base was there, and so the Air Force converted it. This is the picture you're looking at on the screen with about the Wonder Woman invisible jet. This, I don't know where this one was taken. I just grabbed it off the internet, but they did one of these at Altacundum when I was there, where they had just the wheels and the thing to climb into the cockpit with the Wonder Woman sign. So some of the Air Force there had a sense of humor in 2005 when I was there. So that was my experience with the Air Force when I was in Iraq. And then we were relieved by you guys, but that was as we were leaving.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
But they had a sense of humor, which I thought was hilarious.
That's good. I'll say I never jumped out of an aircraft, so I
don't ever.
You got that on me. I tend to like staying in them.
Every jump was a night jump because I closed my eyes.
Oh,
I'm definitely afraid of heights.
I wanted to go airborne, but I got hurt before I was actually slotted to go after my second deployment, but I got the old medical retirement instead. Although I'm weird, Nick. I only wanted to jump out of planes because I'm afraid of heights.
Bro, a quarter of my body is filled with metal due to a jump accident. I am 1/4 Wolverine, and that is thanks to the airborne.
So,
and if I had to go back to my 18-year-old self, they're like, dude, the $125 a month isn't worth it. Stay away.
I don't know that I would have wanted to go as hardcore. I would have been happy probably being a 5-jump chump. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. So, Deanna, so you've talked about this series and where you kind of think it's going. But obviously you're more than just one series because, you got the long haul of the writing. So where do you see yourself taking your stories next? You've mentioned you read a little bit of everything in the pre-show, from romance to sci-fi and, all the dystopian things that have become modern science. So, at the time of recording, we're not being doom and gloom, but they did find a strange new virus from the trenches of Marianas that they decided to maybe it would be cool to bring up. I'm just saying, no, we saw that movie.
It's 2023. Leave it alone.
That's right. Leave it
where you found it, bro. There's flowers blooming in Antarctica. Also leave them alone.
Yes. So with that being said, we don't want you to encourage the fates to more bad ideas that you're writing for your dystopian. So are you going to write something more uplifting? So if they're listening to you, we maybe get a better future?
I can write something, more uplifting. I have a couple. I did. Yeah, can I write something more uplifting? So the romance tends to be a subplot, in my stories, and that tends to be like the uplifting, piece of it because you need some beauty, okay, and that's what romance offers. But it just tends to be a subplot that feeds in to the overall plot. So it's just not all doom and gloom. It's so funny you asked that because I was just thinking the other day, I'm like, am I always going to write dystopian? And like I have several ideas, for novels, and they're all fairly dystopian. So
do you think
you mentioned fancy talk for quasi depressing? Because you're like, society kind of sucks.
I do. Yeah.
So
but I do like happy endings. I will say that. So I don't want to say how this ends, but because it was when I did this book, I was like, I could see the series potential, but I did want to give the reader good closure. When they got to that sank their teeth into the first one, I was like, no, cliffhangers are for like later on in a series if you're getting it. So it's like you read the first book. If you like it, it gives you closure. But and also because I didn't know if I could get this, book published, and so we'll just take it from there. I have a couple. I mean, my fantasy stuff. When I do dabble in fantasy, tends to be a little bit more uplifting, because then in fantasy it's like, there's magic involved. There's usually good and evil. That kind of clash and you're trying to conquer. So the fantasy stories usually have a good outcome.
So you mentioned you like this. This is what happens when there's a lag. So you mentioned you like dystopian, and you've mentioned in the pre-show that you were a fan of some westerns. Do you think that the link of man on the edge surviving against and in spite of the elements, that common theme is what you like?
Man on the edge is part of it, right? And it's also a larger question of how the entire system is set up as well. So if that makes
Okay.
sense. But you're on the edge. Do you understand if are you part of the system or are you on the edge? So
it's like a frontier story. It's like you get so far and then you run out of space and you got to stop and create a society.
yes.
So those are fun tales. And get depressing too. And
Yeah,
definitely
Elon Musk has actually talked about the frontier, Nick. He actually said that one of the benefits of the space race and potentially colonization past Earth is that it gives the escape valve for society that a frontier gives you. Because all the malcontents can take their ball and go home somewhere else. Just like, you don't like England, come to the colonies. You don't like the colonies, go out west. I mean, eventually you run out of west. But the idea is, of course, if you've got somewhere to go, people that are perpetually unhappy can, expand outwards. And
we should expand inwards into the oceans that are not fully explored.
Yeah,
Once we solve the problem of not being crushed by the crushing depths. But
so stories about aquanauts instead of astronauts, would you consider that speculative fiction? Well, definitely spec fic, but it could be sci-fi.
Yeah,
it's
no,
absolutely
it would be sci-fi. It's interesting you're talking about colonization. I was just looking at because like everybody's pretty like familiar, with like Elon Musk's going to Mars and stuff like that, but there could be a case made for Titan, which is one of the moons near Saturn, because they're pretty sure that it's got subsurface ice or water that you could tap into, and it has a dense atmosphere, unlike Mars, right? So unless they're going to put a dome on it or that protects you from all that radiation, or you're living underground, you could walk around theoretically on Titan without pressure suits, but it's like super cold. So they would have to figure out, that piece of it, how to, get you the right gear.
A park is not going to do it.
Yeah, no. But it has a lot of petrochemicals or not petrochemicals, but it's got like methane lakes and stuff like that, and things that they think they could use like for materials to build human habitats and to heat them if as a power source.
I think what would keep me away from Titan is that's where Thanos is from, and no.
There you go.
So if you could, if they started colonization and you could get there safely, and your family was willing to go with you, would you do it? Would you leave Earth?
I've asked myself this. Can I come back? So if the answer is I could come back, then yeah, I would consider doing it. But if it's like a one-way trip, like I actually read a short story, like it was like this company that put out these like little single, they ejected like these little single compartments, on the trajectory, and it send you to Mars, and the parachute would open, and when you hit there, the beacon would pop out, and someone would come get you and leave you out. And those people were more on a one-way trip, and that made me think. I was like, if it was one way, I don't know, I like the blue sky and ocean here, so probably no. I probably wouldn't go.
I could see room for a colonization story that kind of mirrors what we did with Georgia and the United States, or with Australia, where they were like penal colonies to get like, you could rot in jail, or you could start all over on this alien planet that might kill you.
Yeah, but watch, it'll be like Australia, where they got like the huntsman spider, and there's going to be like space Titan huntsman spiders that are the size of a Buick. And I'm just going to, as soon as I get on there, I'm going to get back on the ship. I'm like, I don't care how you get us back. Get us back. Because that's a nope.
There is, I'm trying to think of that. Well, if it comes to me, there's that show on Amazon, that The Expanse. Have you guys seen that?
It's on my queue list. I keep getting made fun of that I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. So, but it's worth checking out if you like the whole colonization with Mars idea, and the Fedorak, because like the people that have colonized Mars are it's interesting. They're pretty militaristic. So
like the Makos from Star Trek, because I'd be a Mako.
Yeah, so check it out. You might like it.
Okay. So are there one of the things that you see a lot of in dystopian sci-fi is this idea of the one world government. which
Mhm.
or the corporation, which none of that makes sense to me, because it's just, we can barely control our little corner of the world, and the idea that governments would get more efficient the more you scale out just doesn't track. I mean, AIs maybe, but that's a whole nother scary future. Do you think there are some political organizations that make more sense to you when you're looking at sci-fi? Like you went in this story, the children of, how do you say, Apophis?
Alpheus. It's the
Alpheus.
river. It's the river
Okay.
there, the river valley. That's what it's named after, the city.
Oh, okay.
Um, uh, but so there is a government there, but it's like a fledgling government. The reason why the corporation is in it is because they had the technology to get everybody there. So that's
Okay.
kind of how they call the shots. Um, but there was a small, like, somewhat democratic government that's evolved. Um, but the founder, and it's not too much in this book, but the founder was of the corporation was one of those men who he's talked about a little bit. There's like statues of him, everywhere. Thought very highly, of himself. I mean, there are people like that, and that'll go on to conquer things and create these huge institutions. So that's
Yeah.
how
So
I solved that, problem with my book. If you're talking about, like government and scaling, but the second book, there's definitely there's problems in the government too, and that's actually like a major subplot that runs in the sequel.
One of the things that a lot of dystopian, the giant mega corporation type fiction ignores is, at what
Mhm.
point in time does a corporation become a government if they're the only polity? Because, if you look at the concept of money, like, how does that exist if there is nothing backing it? If it's just digital, it's just money because I say it's money, which is, if your corporation becomes the government, does it pay itself? Like it gets a little wonky when you try to think of like the underlying financial infrastructure that would support it, because it becomes circular, almost like a circular firing squad. And so I think at a certain point, almost, when you do the mega corporations, and if there aren't more than one competing, when do they stop being a company and when do they start being a government? I don't know. It's a weird concept. I don't think many people look at when they write those.
Right. So I still think that you need some forms of currency as just as a mechanism as exchange. As far as what's backing it, it's really the legitimacy of the institution, right? That says this is good, whether because we say so, and usually, I guess here on Earth we're used to it like being a nation state and the coercive power of a state saying, that's what we say it is. Now it's a little bit more intricate than that, in a global economy, and states can't just do whatever they want. But so that's kind of how I handle the currency. I still think you need like some kind of medium of exchange. It's still a market economy, if you will.
To add on to that, we're talking about, when does a business stop being a business, start being a government? Well, you start looking at how a business is task ordered, and it fits very similar to how a military environment is. So you have an HR department, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's S1. That's personnel. You have research and development, things like that. We'd call that S2. That's Intel. You have operations. That's S3. You have supply and logistics. That's S4. So and hell, in Iraq, you couldn't get coin currency. You had POGs that you
Oh,
had
I
to, like,
remember those.
remember those? It, like, you'd get dollar bills in your change when you went to the Green Bean or the PX or whatever. But as far as change, they gave you pieces of paper, cardboard. Sometimes it had a cool jet on there. Sometimes it had guys, foot soldier guys, infantry dudes, just living the suck, But if you look at a corporation, you look at the military structure, they're almost identical. And it's probably how government should run too, is like the military. But send the hate mail to Stabby as always, if you disagree. Yeah, it fits right in. You have all the S shops, in the military, and then you have all the divisions within a corporation that make things happen, just like the S-shops are trying to make things happen within like a battalion or
Well,
battalion level.
it's interesting that you bring it up. I mean, it would be in the corporation's interest to have like, you know, an economic system there, right?
An internal one.
So I think that was how. Now, when it becomes a government, I mean, it's like, you know, what are the rules that like on a, you know, on another planet, you know, when there's only a couple major players with the technology that people need to survive, right?
So
you had something?
I mean, if you want to know when a corporation stops being a corporation and wants to be a government, all you have to do is watch Resident Evil. Because the Umbrella Corporation stopped being a corporation at some point and became the be all of how to survive and, you know, not become a zombie. So I'd say that a corporation stops being a corporation and becomes a government when zombies become involved.
When
All right.
become involved. All right.
So when you designed your planet, obviously you've got humans there. Did you design anything specific for like the plant life, the aliens? Because on the cover, and I'll throw that back on the screen real quick, the cover of the plants are, I think, purple or black or something. I don't know, colorblind, remember? But they're definitely not green like we're used to, or the amber waves. So did you factor that in? Like, you know, obviously this is just artistic flair, but when you were designing the planet, like how did you go about creating the natural life there?
Well, based on the climate and you know, and looking at the type of animals that would that might be able to survive there, if I had to, I mean, so like Earth is our control, right? Like that's what we know as our point of reference. So they're reptilian in nature, but their skin changes to adapt, okay, to the temperatures. So that's how I did the animals. For the plants are somewhat similar on Earth, but I made them blue just because the photosynthesis process is a little bit different on this planet. And as you know, far as like a lot of the purple here that the artist captured, it's the rocks that the Gildspar are in. They're like a dark purple, and the mineral is like a white vein through it, like a granite. That's what it looks like. So that's it. And she captured it like actually pretty well.
Oh.
So yes, I did factor that all in. Thank you.
Yeah, having that knowledge now, looking at the cover, it gives me a lot more. I mean, I already had respect for the cover. I thought it was beautifully done, but it adds a little bit more insight into what I'm looking at. Which, as a artist dude, one of those artsy fartsy guys, that type of visual information really is impactful for me. So that's cool. So, I want to 3D print that now.
Yeah,
So,
I do some different things with the animals, and that's for a purpose. There are like small details like sprinkled, you know, throughout the book, and I'll kind of leave it at that. But there's
Do you
there's
go
different
like
things
really?
that happen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Finish your thought, please. Sorry.
No. So they do have some like abilities that like aren't some bioluminescence, you know, because a lot of them live in the rock. So bioluminescence at night, they're able to digest this mineral that's in this rocks. So that also is additional protection of the storms. This planet has a strong magnetosphere. So that plays into the evolution as well, because like there's a lot of theories on when like the magnetic poles flip and everything. I don't know if you know what I'm referencing. When the magnetic poles flip, you might
Yes.
see a big explosion in the type of species that arise. Here, actually, that's like a big theory. So I reference that in the book as well.
So then would you consider this somewhat hard sci-fi, since you certainly leaned more into the research-backed conceptualizations?
You know, it's kind of funny. I do put a couple of those details in. but I wouldn't consider it hard sci-fi because I don't geek out on it because I just didn't want to do like an info dump, exposition. Um,
Right.
but like I do have like a reader magnet that gets a little bit more into this stuff and background on the planet and with a little depiction of the orbit and like the map that because I was talking to some people and they said it'd be really cool if you did that. So I was like,
Good
yeah,
fan.
I probably should,
So how do they get this reader magnet?
They could go subscribe to my newsletter on www.deannafedorak.com and they'll get like a fantasy short story. I'm getting ready to I've already sent the reader magnet out there, but I'll probably post a link to it and set it up here to queue very shortly here before the end of the month.
Okay.
Because
so
it's
in the show notes.
Yeah, because it's a prologue, if you will, and it's and it captures like all that backstory and information. Uh, and my main character understands it because she went through the Expeditionary Academy, um, which teaches them how to explore the planet. So they have to understand all this. So it's her having a conversation with someone, and also the history of why humanity, came there, and how the genetic engineering got started, and all that.
I don't normally buy into. I don't normally read like the YA Academy tropes, but the Expeditionary Academy sounds cool enough. I might actually be invested in a series like that
Yeah.
for like the Space Corps kind of thing.
Because that type of trope takes me back to like Dune, where
Yes.
it goes into the technical data of the flora and fauna of like House Harkonnen, Atreides, all the different planets, especially when you get to Arrakis. That's kind of I actually enjoy that stuff. I geek out over it. I'm like, all right, cool. This one's a silicone-based life form, and why is it a silicone-based life form? And it explains to you why it's a silicon, why that type of life form survives. Is there stuff like that going into like that prologue where it's like the Expeditionary Academy and she's like having that conversation?
Some of that stuff is in there. It's
I'm
like
in.
it's like War on the Planet, but now that like I'm talking to you guys, I'm like, well, I could just expand it, because the prologue is only like it's like one scene in the map and an excerpt from her textbook, her
Right.
expeditionary textbook. Like I slid that in there, but the map is kind of cool. I did like some cool things with the terrain, so.
Because I geek out on that kind of stuff, especially when I'm reading the story and there's a map and I'm like, oh,
I love
that
maps.
in relation? Where's that in relation to? The Silmarillion.
Silmarillion, the Tolkien.
Yeah, the Tolkien book where it has all the maps and it has all the like the data sheets and things like that. It's a very boring read, but it reads like a technical manual because that's what it is. I geek out on stuff like, okay, they went from this part of the map to this part of the map. I'm like, okay, let me go to the map. I feel like Dora the Explorer. We're going to consult the map.
So when you mentioned your main character, the young lady with the baby and the problem baby, are there any secondary characters that are kind of near and dear to your heart?
There are. So where there's a baby, there's a baby daddy, right? So
normally, yes.
Yeah, so he plays in there, and there's an additional person that you meet, Kian, who's a pilot who like lives among the origins. She does have some like mentors, like people. They're much older, they're elderly, but they actually came from Earth, so they do actually remember what society was like back then, how things were different, and that's how they're able to explain to her what's going on. So
that's kind of cool. I like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, we have been going for about an hour and a half, and we promised to try to keep it at an hour because we can keep keeping out. We're definitely going to have you back. You gave us a list of topics you like talking about, so we're doing more discussions anyway. So we'll make that happen. But when you do your future projects, because Nick and I are map nerds, maybe it's the infantry in us, but we lived and died by our understanding of maps.
I live for topography.
I mean, cartography is kind of like
there is some topography. I had I had the gal who designed the map. Hey, this is a desert area. Make this more rainforest, and blah blah. Yeah.
Oh,
So do you
nice.
plan on pushing that forward with other projects you work? Are you going to do that?
It'll be part of the trilogy. She'll visit some of those places. So we
No,
get
no,
a
no.
nice.
When you move past the this trilogy and you write your fantasy or other sci-fi, are you going to keep the trend of mapping out the worlds you write in, or is that just a one-off?
If it's a novel and I probably will. Not for necessarily a short story, but I think for novels, now that I got the map for this one, I like them. Yeah.
I dig the hell out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely keep that going.
Yeah, I think not enough people do that these days. I love me a good map. So did you do that yourself or did you hire that out?
Oh no, I hired it out. I mean, I actually do have like a pencil sketch when I try to figure it out from scratch. Like that was like the first thing I did, the world building, and I drew the colony and figured out the river flow and where the water was coming from and everything like that. But I actually had a professional do the map. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to pimp my own stuff, I'm a graphic designer and I'm pretty good at drawing maps.
So
I'll
who
keep
did
that in
you
mind.
For a future novel, I'm just saying.
who did
I'm
you
cheap.
who did you use? Are they if you want to give them a shout out since they did such a good job?
I can't remember. She was really nice. I think it was a Ukrainian gal I found on Fiverr.
Okay.
And
Oh wow.
yeah,
Fiverr's a great site for stuff
and
like that.
I was clicking through her work and I was like, and yeah, she was pretty responsive and
Do you
was
know
for
what
good
she
price.
used?
Do I know what?
Do you know what she used? So there's Fractal Mapper that just did a ninth edition update. There is CC3, so Campaign Cartographer 3, which is the industry standard, but man, it has got a huge learning curve. And then there's the Ink Arnett, I think it is, something like that everyone uses.
Yeah,
Or there's
she
a bottle of bourbon.
you guys, okay, so I'll have to like get in a sidebar with Nick and show him the map and maybe he'll tell me what she used. I just said I just pointed and said I want something that looks like that. And now that you guys mentioned it, I feel kind of
I will
bad.
do the best I can to identify it, but I draw everything by hand based on my my knowledge from the military.
Okay. So you hand draw it.
Yeah, I one of my many roles in my 16 and a half years of service, I was a scout sniper. So one of the things that we had to do when we were doing reconnaissance missions is draw a topographical map.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what we're seeing are viewpoints, are lines of fire, and things like that. So I got really good at it, and I actually enjoyed it. There was some. It was very cathartic. It was very relaxing, because
Yeah.
you just you and a piece of paper, and you're drawing lines. Like, oh no, wait, that don't look right. And I'm just constantly looking at the scope, looking at that. I'm like, okay, yeah, okay. So then using rangefinders and all the lovely little gadgets they'd give us, because they make you like a junior weatherman, also. So. I know way too much about barometric pressure that I don't want to know.
Oh, well, good. You'll understand that when I mean, so you understand with the drop in barometric pressure, then that is going to signify weather change, right? Good. Okay, so
good weather,
that's
bad
the kind
weather.
Of stuff, that's the kind of stuff I just slip kind of here and there in my book. So
draw.
I'm already going to bite. You don't have to sell it to me anymore.
So you mentioned that you have some action in your novel. So when you sandtable that, like when you map that out in your head to write those scenes, are you like doing sandtables like us grunts did? Or are you picturing it in your head like an op order? Or did you just sort of write it by the seat of your pants and then went with it?
Well, I know usually what happens in the action scene and then I just write it. So, and then like I pass it, like I said, to my aviation or scientific advisor to see if he understands it, which is right my husband. So if he understands what happens, and I know I'm on the right track. So
outstanding. All right, so we asked you if you'd go to a space colony in the future, if that was a thing. But let's ask you more directly: if you could live on this planet in this colony that you wrote about, would you live there with your family?
Well, I'd visit, but it is kind of it is a little dystopian. I mean, I definitely go visit it. I mean, they have some. They do have some perks. It's a modern city. They're successful. you know, the one thing I would do, okay, if I could in my book, is there's a scene where she jumps in a hover jet, you know, with a character she meets right away, and they're zipping around in it, you know, flying over the valley. Uh, I would totally do that. That's what I would do if I could do anything in my book.
One of the I think the most accurate on how a former military guy would handle a situation like that is the opening for Fifth Element, where they've got Dallas Corbin driving the taxi. Have you seen that movie?
I know what movie it is, but I haven't seen it.
He's like going in and out of traffic, breaking all the laws. He's punching the AI machine, trying to tell him like they're basically taking his license because he's so reckless. That is like every grunt I've ever known. That is the most realistic of a hover vehicle I have ever seen.
As far as part of that movie was Chris Tucker, though. Flotsam Paradise, green, super green.
We definitely need to do a review episode. See, we're just adding episodes. We need to do. We're never going to run out of time.
We've added 6 just during this interview. It's like, oh man, we need to do an episode on that. We need to do an episode on that. Dystopian Future, we're doing an episode on that. Resident Evil, all kinds of crazy stuff.
All your fault.
I'm sorry, listeners, but yeah, you gave us way too many ideas.
Yeah. Well, Marissa, I know Resident Evil, but I know I got to go back and watch those movies just based on what you said. So I'll make sure to check it out.
There was a lot of Resident Evil jokes when the coronavirus started happening, and that's sort of my exposure to it. So I haven't dived into it yet, but we might have to for an episode. So if people wanted to reach out to you on the internet, how could they find you? And we'll link it in the show notes as usual.
Okay. So I have. Well, you could go to my website, deannafedorak.com, and there's, you know, my email address up there if you want to drop a line or just sign up for my newsletter. I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, but I'm not on it as much. Okay, so if you want to get a hold of me or follow me, right now I'm posting my
crazy
most stuff through Meta. I mean, I'm scrolling through it. I'm just not. I'm just not posting as much stuff on it. But that's where I'd say that's where you could find me.
Okay. And this is the part, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. They help the right readers find the right books. So do your part. That's especially true with debut authors. They live or breathe by the algorithm that suggests books. So if you read it, you like it, leave a review, tell someone else, and it will help her be able to keep writing and keep her publishing company very, very happy, because the Wild Rose Press, they need reads to keep contracting her. So
yes. So
that is important. And we will link to her publisher's website if you want to check out their other stuff. If they were smart enough to hire her, they clearly got some good taste. So with that being said, you can find us on our link tree, which is linktr.ee, linktree / Blasters and Blades podcast. I will get that right one of these days. Linktree / Blasters and Blades podcast. We link. Have some faith, Marissa. We will link to all the things, the BitChute, the Rumble, the YouTube, the Twitters, all of the things. We'll even tell you how to reach out to Madam Stabby Stab so you can send her all of the hate mail. Have you gotten any yet, Stabby?
No, but I get a lot of love.
I'm disappointed in you, dear listener. You could do better.
No, right. Because they all love me because I don't start the drama. I'm not the drama.
Nick, you and I are going to have to make fake accounts to send her hate mail just so we have something to talk about. I mean, somebody else will do it, clearly. Oh, crap, I said too much. Anyway, so you can find us on the link tree where we link to all the things, the Twitter, the email. We have a Facebook group, / Blasters and Blades podcast, where you can join the conversation. We have our website, which is anchor.fm / blasters-and-blades. They should have never told me I was wrong. Now I can't get it right even when I try. Anchor.fm / blasters-and-blades, where for as little as 99 cents a month, you can help keep the lights on. These episodes aren't free to produce, so we appreciate all of your help. And if you want to support the show more directly, go to buymeacoffee.com / author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com / author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink until the coffee pours out of their eyeballs and the boba tea pours from their ear holes. See what I did? I adjusted on the fly with that little bit of a callback. I was paying attention, people. All right. Thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my poor put-upon co-host who's put up with me for some reason, Doc Cisca, the Madam Stabby Stab and Nick Garber. I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right, thank you for coming on.
Downgraded to third billing.
Thanks
we
so
still
much,
like
JR,
you.
for having me.
Yeah, all right, and we're out.